الغافلين إذ قال يوسف لأبيه يا أبت إني رأيت 11 كوكبا والشمس والقمر رأيتهم لي ساجدين قال يا بني لا تقصص رؤياك على إخوتك فيكيدوا لك كيدا إن الشيطان للإنسان عدو مبين وكذلك يجتبيك ربك ويعلمك من تأويل الأحاديث ويتم نعمته عليك وعلى آل يعقوب كما أتمها على أبويك من قبل إبراهيم وإسحاق إن ربك حكيم عليم صدق الله العظيم.
Alaikum salam wa rahmatullah. Thank you. Shukran, Sheikh Fuad Asutali from Mauritius. A good reminder from the Ayatul Quran, Surah Al-Yusuf, which is also about management of the food, as you know, the one part of the story. Let's welcome all our participants. As I said this morning, Ahlan wa sahlan, marhaba bikum. Your host, Anwar Kara, sitting from Leicester. If you don't mind, Sheikh Salahuddin, my co-host, to appear on the screen at the same time, because then we will introduce you right now on this topic. Can you appear on the screen next to that? Okay, fine, inshallah. So you can see the person addressing to you this morning. A brief about Brother Salahuddin Qara. He was born in UK, I believe, maybe Coventry. So, alhamdulillah, Salahuddin, I know him as a young kid, but now he's a grown up. Alhamdulillah, married father with basically, he has a master degree graduate in chemistry, with experience covering all FMCG sectors. He was a member of MIU Halal, auditor and flavoring and fragrance, a member of certification committee, advisor to the Sharia board, a former manager, I would say, former manager of Halal Food Authority. He worked for many years in that industry. Now he's gone back to the lab, basically. He have gathered a lot of experience in the field. At the same time, alhamdulillah, he's also now doing an alim course in Leicester. So with these few words, alhamdulillah, we will start we have, as I said, we will give you all chances. At the end of the presentation, you can type your question in the chat. Inshallah, that make easier for you. I will give you all a chance. So if I want you, I will give you a chance to talk as well. But please mute your microphone so that for the easy duration of this program. Welcome, everyone. I give you Brother Salahuddin Qara. Ahlan.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Jazakallah khair, Uncle Anwar Kara, for the honor of allowing me to come and speak today, and of course for the very warm introduction. I'll go over a few of those points in a bit more detail so that the participants know exactly who I am. But first, I would like to start with Bismillah and to wish everybody and hope that everybody benefits from this, as it's a critical part of our deen that we are discussing today. I'd like to highlight from the outset that I don't intend to cover much about halal slaughter or any of those aspects of the halal industry. I can discuss it at the end if anybody has any specific questions on this, but my background is very technical and not really within the meat processing portion of the halal industry, though I have some experience in that, which I'll talk about. So a quick introduction about myself. As Brother Anwar mentioned, I have a master's in chemistry and specifically in chemical biology. And I also have experience all across the food manufacturing and consumer goods industry. I started off working in a food testing laboratory, doing nutritional testing, and this was around the time of the now famous in the UK horse meat scandal. So I have a lot of experience in meat speciation testing, so determining whether products contain any number of animal species, and so that gave me some understanding of how contamination can occur within the food industry. As Brother Anwar mentioned, I've been trained by the Majlis Ulama of Indonesia, so MUI, as a halal auditor. I also have been trained in the more recent UAE standard for acceptance of exported products into the UAE. I also have technical training in the British Retail Consortium's auditing standard and ISO 22000, which is another food safety type qualification. I also have specific technical training, which is actually very rare. I believe the MUI in Indonesia have only held this training once, and that's on flavors and fragrances. And I'll cover some of those more complex products and types in this presentation. And finally, the mention of my work at the Halal Food Authority and as part of the Sharia board and advisor to the Sharia board there. That obviously was part of my work there and gave me a lot of experience with discussing a lot of the technical details of and trying to understand where and how these can be, the modern issues can be understood using the Sharia. My current role, I'm currently a technical manager at the UK's largest manufacturer of vitamins and mineral supplements. And as Anwar mentioned, I'm also studying an Alimiyah course as well. So that's enough about me. I'll now continue with the presentation. We still have participants joining, so I'll try to stay quite brief and on topic on the start so that as many people can catch the majority of the presentation as possible. So what we're going to cover is the basics of halal. I'm sure most of the people here already know this, but it's always good to get some understanding of the basic terms and understand what we mean so that we're all speaking about the same thing. I'll try to explain what is meant by technical in terms of halal. It can be misunderstood or people just won't understand how detailed it can be. I'll give you some examples and show you how these technical animal derivatives especially are used within the food industry, and this is not necessarily meat products, and that's why I haven't said meat derivatives. It's animal derivatives from all parts of the animals. And more specifically, I'll cover the most critical in terms of halal, the pork derivative. If anybody knows about the use of animal derivatives, you'll know that it can be very widespread. And then another critical point is wine derivatives or alcohol derivatives, or as we would say, khamr derivatives. And another area that is usually overlooked is microbial products. This is products that are made by some type of fermentation, and they have a number of very critical points that need to be investigated. I'll then go on and give a brief overview of how halal certification operations should be conducted, and cover a brief overview of what a certification process should entail, and that would give good confidence to the consumers of the halal certification. Cover a brief into audits and the understanding of witnessing the processes that are taking place, and finally I'll just show you a little bit of the issues around international halal standards and the fact that there are so many. Of course, that's quite a lot to cover. I don't, and I hope that this is not a lecture, and I hope that there will be some questions at the end, and that we can have some good discussions at the end of this. Of course, take note of the points, and inshallah we'll get time at the end to discuss any issues. So the basics of halal, I think everyone, every Muslim knows most of these points, but I think it's always good to get those terms defined so that we know exactly what we're talking about. So the basics, it's an Arabic word. Halal is an Arabic word that means lawful or permitted, and that's essentially the meaning of it. The part that people not within the halal industry don't understand is that halal is used in so many different areas. You have halal or Islamic finance. You've now, before COVID, became quite popular to have halal travel or halal holidays and these kind of things. So halal is used now not just as the term, but also almost like a brand or an identification. Obviously, you have halal clothing, halal social interactions, and halal ethics, and many other terms. Many other fields have the term halal added to them, not just food, and most certainly not just meat. There are obviously many other terms other than halal and haram, but if they come up, we can discuss them. And obviously the two critical points when it comes to food is to ensure that there is no pork present and that there's no khamr present within the product. So from all of this, it would seem that the issue is quite simple. We're just trying to make sure that these two materials are not present. And so really is there, it's just a simple question. It shouldn't be something that's too difficult. And on top of that, we can say that most or all foods are considered halal, and haram is the exception to these. So obviously we know swine and pork is not acceptable. It's haram. Improperly slaughtered animals, so meta or dead animals, is haram. Khamr and intoxicants are haram. Carnivorous animals and birds of prey, blood and its derivatives, and najis. So again, it still seems like it's not that difficult to answer the question of, is this product halal or haram? But do we need scientists then, if it's that simple? Do we need engineers to understand halal? Do we need technical people to work in the industry? Are they needed? And these are all questions that I actually asked myself a long time ago now. And when you understand the modern food industry, you realize that actually there's a lot more that goes on in our food nowadays than there used to be. So in the modern food industry, it's not simple. The food that most people eat is not lovingly cooked on a stove by somebody they know. It's made in a factory by robots and machines. And as a modern consumer, especially in the West, we require, or we demand, is probably a better way of putting it, that our food is uniform in quality and consistent quality. We demand all of these things from food manufacturers, and that brings about, that's a big challenge for the food manufacturers, but that on top adds a huge deal of complexity to the actual manufacture of food products. And it's because of all of these requirements that we as consumers have put on the food industry that makes products more complex, and therefore they have more what we can term technical ingredients within them. And they also have some very technical processes as well. If, for example, anybody has visited a industrial bakery, and you simply look at the waste that is produced by one of those types of facilities, you can only be shocked by there's no other way of understanding that. And when you ask how many are produced and how much is produced, in the UK, it's an astonishing amount of food that is manufactured on a daily basis, and it's simply because of this huge demand that the processes are the way they are. But there is a positive side to this, and that's that because of all of these requirements that we as consumers put on them, if we harness those tools and those systems that are in place to ensure that things are consistent quality, consistent products, then we can, inshallah, control things or monitor things, and then be able to confirm the halal status of products. So that's why I've put here that the modern food industry poses challenges, and also it provides some of the solutions and provides tools that can be used to monitor the systems. So let's go on to what is technical. So in terms of technical, what do we do in terms of halal? And the main thing is that technical asks why and how. So why do we use animal derivatives? Why do we use wine and its derivatives? Even though this is similar, why do we use pork derivatives? And why do we use microbial products? So animal derivatives, as we probably know, maybe not, we'll see in the coming slides. An animal is a unit that can be sold and slaughtered, but obviously the more that you can make from one animal, the more benefit there is to different industries. And so as much of the animal is used to produce different products. Some of the animal products are raw materials for other processes. Some of them are used directly, like the meat and the wool. But some other materials are actually broken down further, and their constituent parts are then used in different industries that can sometimes be quite surprising in where they're used. Wine derivatives or alcohol derivatives, the alcohol itself. So if we split the alcohol into its subcomponents, so the pure ethanol that's within the alcohol can be used in many different ways, as a solvent and cleaning, and as we know, quite aptly at the moment with COVID, that you can use it as a sanitizer. But then you also have within wine or khamr, actual alcoholic beverage, many flavor compounds and components that can be used across many different industries as well. Pork and its derivatives. Obviously, this is animal, but I've separated out because it has that very critical issue that it is haram no matter what, and so it's just hugely significant, and understanding where it can potentially be used is very important. Microbial products are actually, in terms of those three that are above it, it can contain, or they can potentially have issues with all of them. So you can have a microbial product that would be a yeast type product that would produce alcohol, but could be grown on media that's made from pork and be fed on something that is some other animal derivatives. And so microbial products really need to be carefully examined when we're talking about halal. And then, so how do we control all of this? I'm going to go inshallah into detail on all of these points as we go along. We have to certify. We certify to give certainty. And how do we do that? Well, we ask for statements and documentation from factories. We understand raw materials by assessing their specifications, so we can see what raw materials are broken down into and what their subcomponents are, and sometimes those subcomponents have subcomponents. We look at finished product specifications so that we can assess through using the systems that the factories use that what we've been told is in the product is actually in the product. We look at standard operating procedures to ensure that there's no contamination and those kind of things. And you can also rely on other halal certification bodies, halal certificates. We'll discuss that as well. And also I'll try and touch on time frames or ways of working in terms of a halal in the halal industry, and which parts take a long time if we were to go down the route of actually setting up a certification body. So this is just some information that I want to share so that you are aware of some of the kind of things that are used when we talk about animal derivatives and haram products. So sausage casings, in the UK, it's very popular to have a full English breakfast which has sausages in it, or you have a hot dog. And most people don't realize that the casing, where it comes from. So it's very common to have beef or pork intestines essentially as the casing. And the other ones are obviously not so much of an issue, other than the plastic potentially being non-edible and therefore being a health risk. There's also gelatin, which has very complex process in terms of halal. In terms of the actual process, it's not very complicated. It's essentially boiling some bones or skin and extracting the gelatin from there. But if you understand the process, you're not just boiling one animal, you're taking an abattoir's waste and using that, and simply having one pork bone within a batch of a few tons would, from a Muslim's perspective, mean that it's not suitable, and therefore it's quite difficult to monitor and control. And so gelatin becomes a very high risk material, even though it's used in so many different products. rennet, that's widely used in cheese making. There's a difference of opinion on this within the different schools of thought. However, if you were to examine rennet production, modern rennet production, most would consider it as not halal suitable. Essentially, you grind up stomachs of calves to extract the enzymes, and therefore you can't discount any contamination with non-halal slaughtered animals, and that could potentially make the cheese not halal suitable. Though, in line with keeping things consistent, most modern dairies don't use animal rennet. In my experience, majority of them prefer to use genetically modified microorganisms or bacterial rennet, simply because they can keep the consistency across their thousands of tons worth of cheese that they produce. But there are still some cheeses that are, because of their designated country of origin or their special status, they have to use a specific type of rennet, and those potentially still use animal rennet that's processed in the way that I just mentioned. Glycerol, which is in most products, I would say most food products, most processed food products will have some glycerol somewhere in its manufacturing process. It's quite common for it not to be animal derived, but it definitely can be animal derived. The other issue is if it's a byproduct of biodiesel, then the ethical aspect has to be considered, that we're using something, a food product, to make fuel, and we're using a byproduct as food. Surely it should be the other way around, considering the nutritional situation in the world. Emulsifiers are used in tiny amounts in most products, again, because of how things are manufactured, and they can be sourced from vegetable or animal fat. So again, potential issues there. So I'm hoping that going through this list that you can see that the food industry is a little bit more complicated than most people would imagine. Vanilla extract. So vanilla is used in many products and many ingredients, and the fact that it contains alcohol is up for debate depending on who you ask, because the use of alcohol as synthetic alcohol or
sorry, we have a problem about this the voice.
Sorry, I can't hear you clearly, brother.
Yeah, something is not very well.
No, we can hear. Sorry, the voice is going well. I think there is some issue with personal internet. Salahuddin, if you can, it says there's a little problem with the voice. So, but inshallah, the explanation of your PowerPoint is quite clear.
Okay.
Yes.
See,
Brother Anwar, your voice is very clear, but the voice of Brother Salahuddin is not that clear.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I understand.
Okay.
Salahuddin, I was suggesting that you have a direct microphone.
Yeah.
But I can hear him properly. What's the issue with your microphone, Dr. Salahuddin?
I don't know.
No, it keep on breaking. The reason is I can hear it properly, but it keep on breaking a little point. Maybe that's why I was suggesting to get the microphone, clip microphone.
Yeah.
Can you bring it closer?
Yeah. Let me just.
Yeah. Say from Mauritius, I can hear someone say we can hear clearly. Okay. Okay.
Okay. So I'm not sure if there's an issue or not. I can carry on, and if there's any issues, then brothers let me know. Let me see if I can switch the microphone to a different microphone. Is this microphone any better? Does this sound clearer, or it's the same?
Yes, yes, it sounds clearer.
Yeah.
Sounds
okay.
clearer?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
No problem. I'll carry on. Is that better for the other brother who couldn't hear?
Carry on. Just see. Sometimes it has a little bit kind of an echo. Let me see. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So well, I was vanilla extract and alcohol. So alcohol is used as a solvent in many flavorings, and so this can lead to issues with the finished product alcohol content and whether it's alcohol free or not, and what would the ruling be from the ulama on how much alcohol is acceptable, if it's not khamar, or if it is khamar, then what's the situation. So it can be quite concerning and quite a challenge to understand this. The final point that I want to mention here is about carmine or cochineal. It's used as a red food coloring, and according to some opinions, it's not acceptable, and some opinions it's acceptable. And this not only leads to an issue of whether it's acceptable or not, but it also leads to confusion within the industry. And if there's confusion in the industry, then it means that people aren't going to want to, or the industry is not going to be forward in terms of wanting to proceed with getting halal certification, because it's not clear as to what we're actually asking for. A point to mention here is that there's no legal requirement in the UK in particular, and probably in many other countries, to label the source of any of the above ingredients. So you can't just check if you pick up any product, a biscuit, and it says emulsifiers on the back of the packet. You don't know whether it's come from a halal source or haram source. That's why in the UK many people go for vegetarian only products and things like that. But you can never be 100% certain when it comes to things like alcohol, because alcohol is deemed as vegetarian, and therefore you don't know the level of alcohol within a product, or whether it's used alcohol-based flavoring in there. For example, it would still show as vegetarian. Okay. So let's look at some haram materials and what they can be used for. And I hope that this doesn't disgust too many people or shock too many people, but essentially this is the kinds and the extent where materials are used. So as I was mentioning, khamar can be used in cooking in many sources, and these will be listed as vegetarian, but obviously they're not halal. And there's also just straight alcoholic beverages, which sometimes are not labeled as clearly as others, or they don't look like alcoholic beverages. And alcohol can also be used in medicine. So this would obviously come under a different ruling than for food, because if it's a required medicine, then it's most likely would still be permissible. Then we'll move over to human hair, for example. Obviously, anything from a human cannot be consumed, but human hair, you can extract a common amino acid, L-cysteine, which is used as a bread improver or seasoning or flavoring agent. And so this has to be examined. So some of the other waste products from humans can also be used in some cosmetic type products. When we talk about blood, which is obviously impermissible, there is a special type of growth media for microbes called blood agar, for example. Anybody who's worked in microbiology will have heard of this material, and that is essentially used to grow certain type of bacteria. There's also some food products in specific countries. They have blood sausage, for example. In the UK, black pudding, and obviously they would be haram anyway. Then you have the animals that haven't been slaughtered correctly. So this is the small part that I will talk about, animals that and slaughtering. Obviously, any of those products can be made into an actual food product, so cooking or something like that. The bones can also be used as gelatin or made into activated carbon. Another thing to point out, and this is still widely used, is L-cysteine from duck feathers. So again, because it's made from a similar material as a human hair, they extract the same amino acid out of there, and they use it in similar situations. And on my next slide, there's a specific one about pigs. So really, with a pig, pretty much anything and everything is used. From the fat is used in lard for frying or cooking, but then it can be further processed into fatty acids or glycerin, as I mentioned earlier. Some of these can be fractionated out further into things that can be used in liquids and cosmetic, in liquid soaps and lipstick and cosmetics. And some other products can also contain that. The skin can be used to make gelatin, which goes into a huge range of different products. Sweets and some yogurts use it as a thickener. Capsules for medical products as well can be porcine gelatin as well. The meat can be made into many meat products, which we're probably aware of and would definitely steer clear of. The hair, again, has the same issues with human hair and duck feathers. They can be made into different amino acids. Another point to mention with pig hair, or bull bristles as it's sometimes known, is that it can be used to make brushes, and this can be any type of brush. So whether that's a hairbrush for cosmetic purposes, or whether it's for a paintbrush, for artwork and things like that. The brushes can contain essentially hairs from pigs. And again, the blood can be used to make a huge number of products. The bones as well can be used to make activated carbon. So if you heat them up, essentially, you can carbonize the bone and then use it as that, or you can actually have bone china filters. It's a filter made from porous, essentially bone ground up and blended with clay type materials. And all of these are obviously impermissible, and anything that then comes in contact with, for example, a filter that's made from bone or from activated carbon that's from a haram source, then that will contaminate the product. So the final one that I wanted to touch on is fermented products. So this is a cartoon that I found of different types of fermented products. So many of these people won't know about and they're not common everywhere, but we'll just quickly go through them. So famous obviously is beer, which is made from fermentation of grains with yeast. So that's a fermented product. But then you also get root beer, which as long as the alcohol, it's not gone through alcoholic fermentation, will most likely be considered as halal, because but there could potentially be an issue with the naming. There's some yogurt-based drinks and yogurt itself, which are obviously also microbially produced. They have bacteria in them that sours the milk, and all cheeses nowadays have some kind of microbial relationship in them. They have pickles and sauerkraut and things like that. I think over the lockdowns, people got quite into making sourdough bread and bread at home, especially in the UK and US. So those are also microbial products. And obviously quite a few of these, like the chocolate, which also has microbial fermentation in the process, they're not all an issue. They're not all haram, or they're not all contaminated in some way. So how do we control all of this, and how do we make sure that the product is actually halal? So that's the things that we need to look out for. But how do we monitor it? Really, it's a 4-step process. First, you need a technical review. So essentially, you need to find out whether any of those risky materials are present in your products or in the products that wish to be halal certified. You have to then carry out a verification audit of some description, and we can talk about that in detail. And then you need a review. And this step, though people may think that it's not critical or very important, but actually in terms of the halal certification process and for its acceptance in certain parts of the world, it's actually critical to have this step in place. And finally, you issue a certificate and potentially allow the use of logos and halal marks and the like. You have to remember, when you come to certification, there's many different ways of going about it. So you can either certify products. So you say this product is halal certified, and that means the end consumer will recognize that. But it could be made in many different factories. You could certify a manufacturing site. So you say that anything produced at this factory will be halal. And then probably the safest approach is you certify the factories to say anything that is produced here is halal, but then also double check and ensure that only specific products are actually marked or have the logo present on them, so that people can, or consumers can be doubly sure of the halal status of the product. So let's go on to an overview of the certification process. So this is much more systems based now. It's about how you would actually go about conducting a halal audit and how you would set up a halal certification system. So in a sense, you need legal documentation. And you need to ensure that that there's no conflicts of interest, and set up a contract and those things. And obviously that's not my specialty, so I won't go into much detail, but essentially you need to comply with whatever legal requirements are in the country that you're operating in, and make sure that you're operating within the legal confines of what you're doing, and you have systems in place for termination of contracts and removal of certificates and all of those kind of things within the contract that you set up. Then you need to conduct a technical product review. Now, that's obviously just 3 words, technical product review, but it is potentially the longest time taken in this whole halal certification operation if you're doing it correctly, because you need to get to the bottom of all the raw materials that are used within the product that you're certifying. So you review raw materials and you look for halal certificates. So hopefully, and it's becoming more and more common, that products are actually, or raw materials are actually halal certified. And that means you can now potentially make a product that's halal because every raw material that's used in it. So for example, a very simple biscuit, you can have the flour is halal certified, the butter is halal certified, the sugar is halal certified, and the salt is halal certified. So in that sense, we'll cover halal certificates in detail, the product will be very easy to be halal certified, the finished product. Another way, if the product is not halal certified, is to ask for a halal statement or a declaration from the manufacturer to ensure that the product and that they confirm that there's no haram materials in it, or there's no chance of contamination, and many other things. And I'll show an example of one of the type of questions that we can ask. Another way, if we want to scrutinize the raw material in more detail, is to go through raw material specifications. And these are obviously technical documents that a raw material manufacturer will be selling to the producer based on this. And so these are kind of legal documents that are shared between the manufacturer and the supplier of the raw materials. And so technically and in theory contain all the information about that raw material, and so should be the kind of base on how to move forward and how to assess something. The other thing to look out for in terms of technical, it's all well and good that you've checked that the raw materials are all okay, so that a biscuit is made with halal certified raw materials. But if the factory also handles lard from pigs on the very same line or in the same factory, and they make some strange biscuit using that, then there's no real way of ensuring that it's halal because of the contamination risk. So you also need to understand whether the manufacturing site is actually halal compliant themselves, and that's where you might need to look into cleaning procedures. And another thing that's quite often overlooked is processing aids that are used. So again, we'll take the biscuit example again. If the biscuit is made in tins on a manufacturing line, you also need to assess whether they're spraying on some kind of non-stick spray, some type of oil, some release aid into the tins that are making the biscuit, and whether that's halal certified. Because obviously, if the raw materials are all okay, the site is not contaminated with any haram material, but there's a tiny amount of oil that's from an unknown source, or from pork, or from some animal fat, then the product again is not going to be halal. So getting all of this upfront and assessing all of this is critical to certification. And the last thing that you would check to try and tie all the raw materials together and make sure that you have all the information that you need is to check the finished product specification, to make sure that you know that you've got all the raw material information for everything that goes into the product. Right. The next thing we'll carry on is the on-site verification audit. And the reason I call it a verification audit and not a technical audit or quality audit is because it's just verification of all that has gone before. So what you're simply doing is checking that everything that we talked about above is correct and it's actually how it is. So a significant part of a halal audit is to be on site and verify that the recipe is the recipe, the raw materials are the raw materials, they're coming from the supplier that we've been told they're coming from, that they contain no other additional materials, that there aren't any processing aids that are used that haven't been declared. And the other thing is quite critical in terms of you're being a witness to this process, and you are essentially you're giving your testimony to say that this is what's going on. So the auditors, in terms of the certificate, is on whose back the whole process lies. They're the key witness to the process, and so being a halal auditor may sound like a very interesting job, and of traveling to many different factories and seeing different things, but it's actually a huge responsibility because in the end, if the product isn't halal suitable and people are consuming it, and all of the issues that come around that, it's kind of your responsibility. So this whole process is quite in terms of the responsibility that it gives is quite huge. And the last thing that you have to do in terms of verification audit is to close out any of the issues that are found. So if there is some contamination issue, or there's some ingredient issue, it's also time to check those and clarify what's going on. So after the audit, if you find essentially a non-conformance, and you can get the factory to review and change things. Now, as I mentioned before, there's also a review step that needs to happen, and some of the points about this review is that it should be impartial. So, for example, the auditor shouldn't be signing off his own work and saying, yeah, it was definitely a halal site. It should be reviewed by somebody who didn't conduct the audit, who's looking at it from a neutral perspective, who's not being pressured into certifying a site. The review also means that you can maintain the standards that you're working to, because they're making sure that reports and findings and the technical assessment has been carried out to the correct standard. And this is also the point where you can have constant Sharia oversight. So you can have a scholar sat in on this review to make sure that if there are any issues that can be addressed immediately. And obviously the last step, it's quite simple, it's the issuing of the certificate. And that's how you would conduct the audit. So let's look at some of the documents in detail. So the first one is, what kind of questions would you ask? And the questions that you ask at the start really become the foundation of what you're going to do to move forward. So this is a rough example of the kind of questions that you would ask. So you'd ask information about the ingredients used in the product. So there's many different ways of doing this. You can ask it in a questionnaire. You can ask it in a form, in a table, online system. I know in Indonesia they have a very famous system there, Serol, that essentially gathers a lot of this information together. And obviously with today's big data systems, it's much easier to work in that way rather than having some kind of paper system. And so you'd ask, what are the ingredients, any relevant coding that allows you to trace that through their system in the factory, the source of the ingredient, so whether it's animal, plant, synthetic, mineral, who the supplier is and the manufacturer, because it's very common in the food industry to have a different supplier and a different manufacturer, because there's third parties, there's post-production processes that happen, all sorts of things. So you need to clarify the entire supply chain, and then you ask them to provide a pork-free site statement or a different type of halal statement, or if they have, then a halal certificate at the end. And obviously you need to be very specific about asking about pork or pork derivatives, so that you know whether you can actually proceed from the very start. Okay, so I mentioned that I'll go into a little bit of detail about halal certificates. And the reason I wanted to go over this in quite a bit of detail is there are globally a huge number of halal certification bodies. There are so many halal certification bodies just based in the UK. I can name, I think, at least 2 or 3 based in Leicester, where me and Brother Anwar are based. So that's just within one city in the UK. I know in London there's about 4 or 5. And so all of these different halal certification bodies, if you get a halal certificate for all the raw materials, we'll go back to the biscuit example again, there could be a certificate that's been issued from just one person working from his home, and all he's done is called up the manufacturer, has asked, it's sugar? Okay, it's from plants. Yeah, okay, it's halal. He's done no checks, no nothing, but he's issued a certificate. And this manufacturer will happily send that halal certificate to anybody who asks about halal, and most people will just accept it because they don't know what the meaning is. Not all of those halal certification bodies are accredited. So there's the MUI and JAKIM in Malaysia, the UAE. So there are a number of global government-based organizations that accredit halal certification bodies, and that gives some kind of confidence in you as another halal certification body or as a manufacturer trying to produce something that's halal, to say, actually, this is a well-recognized, they're working to a significant standard. They're not just issuing halal certificates without doing their due diligence. So many of the times, if the halal certification body is not listed on one of these global international halal accreditors lists of approved certifiers, then there needs to essentially either you ask further questions or you just treat it as it's not halal certified and ask all the questions again. So sometimes a halal certificate will really frustrate the manufacturer, because they'll tell you, we've got halal certificates for everything, why are you not accepting them all? And to explain to them these kind of things, it doesn't feel good as a Muslim Ummah to have to explain that actually there's some people who are not doing the right thing. But in reality, that is the reality. Halal certificates are not always the only document, and sometimes it can make situations very difficult. Right, my last few slides here about the international halal standards, and there's just so many. The list that I'm going to show you coming up is a fairly old list, and there's been many revisions and many updates, but essentially this is, if you talk to people who are either not Muslim or they're not within the halal industry, but they're working from from the industry itself, from food manufacturing or flavoring industry, this is the one thing that really frustrates them, that there are so many halal standards. Why can't you just give us one? If you tell us that something needs to be vegetarian or vegan, we know what that means. There's only one explanation. Of course, there's the differences in opinion from different countries because they follow different schools of thought. There's differences because of political and economic reasons. There's different ways of working, and so there's a huge number. So I think the first to ever be published, if I'm not mistaken, was the Malaysian standard. So there's a few listed there. There's also the HAS or the MUI standards. They're obviously for Indonesia. Singapore also has its own standards. Pakistan has some standards, this potentially quite an old one. Morocco and Algeria also have halal standards, but they're not as stringent as the others. The UAE is one of the more recent additions to this grouping, and they cover, and so does Malaysia and Indonesia actually, they cover not only the products but also the halal certifiers as well. And the thing is, and again, the GSO standards, they cover the certifiers. We have tried, as an ummah, we have tried to unify under SMIC, and most of the standards mentioned above are based on SMIC. But again, as I mentioned, there's differences of opinion, different economic reasons, many other situations that come into play, sometimes cultural situations as well, mean that a country will be more will be stricter on certain things. But as I said, this is quite an old list, and so to conclude there, I think we'll give some time for some questions now. So Jazakallah khairan, and thank you for listening and your attention. I hope the sound was good enough for everyone. But any questions, I'll be happy to respond, inshallah.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you, Brother Salahuddin, for this very technical presentation. Said maybe I can, if you have some question, I can't find something like raise your hand on my system. Should be. We'll give you the floor. At the same time, inshallah, this kindly write your email in the chat box. We will be sending you the recording of this program, inshallah, when it's up there. So now the floor is open. As no one have written the question, I will allow someone to talk, maybe first. Okay, whoever, you can unmic and unmute yourself, or if you want, send me a message and let me know that I can unmic it if you can't, and unmute yourself. The floor is open. Welcome. While we are waiting for the people to think about the question, my interest question, because my wife likes cooking. The biggest problem I have is the vanilla.
Yeah.
So the vanilla, we can't find it without alcohol. And you mentioned something about it, because I need to know and I want to please her whenever I travel. So please elaborate on this vanilla issue.
Yeah, so the vanilla issue is a very common question. So if I sound like I have answered this question before, it's because I have many times. Essentially, there is now available in some of the Muslim supermarkets that are synthetic, so vanillin, not vanilla itself, and these are I think glycerol based or glycol based flavoring, so it can be used in the same similar manner, and sometimes they add a bit of coloring to it to make it look like that. Another option is to use the whole pod, so it's not soaked in alcohol. So that's a good option, but of course that can be expensive. Another one that I have experience with, as I also like to cook, is to use vanilla paste. So it's not the liquid form. Some of the paste actually don't have alcohol in them. So there's a few options there. In terms of industrially, what are the opinions of the MUI and the like? They actually allow the use of alcohol as long as it's not as long as it's pure synthetic alcohol in flavorings, as long as it doesn't affect the finished product and it's not detectable. So essentially when you bake a biscuit, if you're putting vanilla into it, the only thing that you want to be left is the vanilla. and you don't want the solvent to still be there. And that's why one of the reasons that alcohol is a preferable carrier, because it can be removed during the manufacturing process. So any cooking that is done will potentially remove a significant portion of any alcoholic residue that is there. They don't, to keep things consistent, they don't use hammer. They don't use an alcoholic beverage to extract the vanilla. I've actually seen this process myself. It's actually huge vats of essentially chemical grade ethanol that they use. So it's pure ethanol, similar to the strength that is used to make hand sanitizer. And they soak the vanilla in there and it extracts the flavoring out. So because it's not intended, so it goes back to intentions, as everything does, it's not intended to be there as an intoxicant, and it's removed during the manufacturing process. Therefore, in an industrial setting, for halal certification purposes, alcohol-based flavorings are acceptable under certain conditions.
Yeah, the floor is open. Please, I want anyone, please, unmute. You can ask a question to Brother Salahuddin directly. The floor is open.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam.
Nizam from Mauritius. In fact, again, on the same issue, the alcohol, vanilla, I've been reading something about the nature identical vanilla, and I've seen somewhere that for it to qualify as nature identical vanilla, it needs to have at least 35% of alcohol in that. And this is certified halal. I just don't understand. Is there any percentage below which or above which it is halal or haram? Please, could you please clarify?
In terms of the raw material, the flavoring, sometimes they are up to 90% because it's the solvent. It's just the liquid portion, and then when it's baked in the product, then it will be next to close to zero. So in terms of in terms of the actual raw flavor, I believe by MUI standard, there's no limit to the percentage. Of course, if you were to consume this nature identical vanilla with 30% alcohol in it, it would seriously damage your health before intoxicating you. So I think the fact that it's present and that it will be pure synthetic alcohol, as it's known, or pure ethanol, that's why it's certified and it's acceptable. So the vanilla issue is relatively settled in the halal industry. I hope that answers your question.
Yes, please. The floor is open. Next.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam, Brother Muhammad.
Yeah, just a question regarding the gelatin. I think the scholar, they not agree on it totally. Some of them say that gelatin is acceptable, whatever the origin of it. So just clarification about the gelatin.
Yeah, I have heard of this opinion that from any source it's acceptable, but in the halal accreditation bodies, this is not the opinion that is taken. They settle on that it needs to be from a halal animal slaughtered correctly. I know the evidence or the basis of this, that from any source it's acceptable, is to say that it has been changed. So that it's changed from skin or bones into gelatin. But the fact is, within the skin and bones, the material that we call gelatin will still be carrying out the same function. So there is some change, but it's not complete transformation the same way that alcohol changes into vanilla, into vinegar, for example. So I've heard of this position, but it's not accepted in terms of certification. I haven't found anywhere that certifies gelatin based on this principle, because otherwise you would be able to, if you take this position to the end, you can therefore say that pork gelatin, it would be halal because it doesn't matter about the source of the gelatin. And this is the main contention here, that if one pig bone, for example, ended up within the beef mixture that they were using to make the gelatin, then is it acceptable or not? And if you say it doesn't matter the source, then it will be halal. But I don't think if you asked even the group here today, if they would say that the pork gelatin is halal, they would say no. This is what I've read and what I've heard to date.
Thank you.
Yeah, also regarding the rennet, animal rennet,
yeah.
Also there is, basically they say that the pork gelatin, also the rennet, is just the changing from the origin part. The new rennet is totally different from the original one. That's why it maybe say that's accept or halal. Yeah. So the rennet also maybe the same thing.
So with the rennet, so the microbial rennet now it's not. So they use bacteria to produce similar material to what would be found in the stomach of the calf, but the original opinions for the permissibility of using animal rennet, I believe, is in the Hanafi opinion, that you can, so essentially in the past, when you made cheese using animal rennet, you could actually add milk to the stomach of the calf that's been slaughtered, and then remove this. But in the modern process of extracting rennet, what they do is they freeze dry the entire stomach. They then blend it and then extract whatever they can. So it's not just the enzymes that are taken from the stomach, it's potentially contaminated with them. That's why modern days animal rennet is stayed clear. There's one question in the chat about dealkalized wine. This is a very interesting topic, actually. So there's a few different opinions on this. The most common and the widely accepted opinion is that if the khamar, so if you produce khamar, so you made alcohol, and it was made for the intention of it to be alcohol and to be consumed as wine, then it becomes haram, and it's haram within itself. So even if you remove the ethanol from it, which is what you do when you dealkalize wine, the remnant is still khamar. So it's a khamar derivative, which hasn't changed. So it hasn't been converted into vinegar. So it's still, there's no chemical transformation like in the case of vinegar. So it's just a physical separation. Therefore it's still the impermissible substance. So dealkalized wine would not be acceptable. However, if there is a product that is created or that is imitating wine, but it never became, so it was never wine to start with, so it's just flavorings, it would be acceptable, but it would be disliked because it's very misleading for the Muslim consumer, and many of the international halal certification bodies would not allow this to be certified with wording such as wine or whiskey or something like that in the name. So they have strict rulings on even the names of products and the packaging of products and things like that. So it can go into a lot of detail.
That also include halal champagne, for example.
Yeah, so you wouldn't be able to halal certify to the MUI standard a product that was named halal champagne, because they would say champagne is haram, and you'll confuse the consumer. So they would have to name it something like a halal sparkling drink or halal sparkling celebration drink. There are many ways that people have got around it, but yeah.
Yeah, give chance to author, please. Ask your question.
Yeah, Assalamu alaikum. I have a question regarding certain soft drinks. Like the percentage of alcohol is less than 1%. I doubt whether it is haram or halal. Less than 1%.
So it depends on the product itself. So if this is purely a soft drink, so Pepsi or something like that, then we're discussing the flavors topic. So this again, if you test and verify that it's less than 1%, normally in the UK it has to be below 0.05% to be classed as non-alcoholic. This, interestingly, as a side fun fact, if you like, many fruit juices just naturally have a percentage of alcohol in them because of the oxidation of the sugars and the natural presence of yeast, for example. So there will be some percentage alcohol. So less than, I would say less than 1%, or more likely less than 0.1% will be absolutely fine. If the soft drink has been, like we mentioned with the dealcoholized wine, has been fermented in some way and that has brought about this this alcoholic nature within it, then it wouldn't be acceptable because you've made khamr, essentially, just a very weak one. And so there's two different ways. If it's a pure soft drink and it's just because of the flavorings that you've got some alcohol present, generally in halal certification world, it would be accepted as certifiable because it's just flavoring. But if you were talking about a product that has been fermented and this made the alcohol within itself, so there was conversion of sugars to alcohol within this product, it would be, you would have gone down the route of making khamr, and then it would not be acceptable.
Thank you.
Yes.
Yes, brother
Sir.
Sunday. Yeah, okay. You know, another question? Yes.
Yeah, just there is a qaida says that ما أسكر قليله كثير فقليله حرام. So who is making drunk big quantity, it means the small quantity also is not permitted. So it is we can use this one regarding, for example, the soft drink. For example, I'm not talking about Pepsi or Coca-Cola. I'm talking about like those energy drink like Red Bulls or we sort of course we energy drink more than anything.
You're specifically referring to the quantity of alcohol, or just because they have some effect on the mind?
Well, the effect of the mind, because
Yeah.
the qaida says that ما أسكر كثير فقليله حرام.
Yeah. Again, this would, in terms of halal certification, there is also a requirement that it's the product doesn't affect the human body and is not damaging, for example. So you will never find, for example, somebody certifying tobacco or something like this because it's harmful, though it's readily available. It's likely that these type of products would not be certified, but if they are strictly a soft drink, then they may be accepted and certified as halal because they would revert to things like coffee, for example, that have slight effects on the mind. So yeah, it's a good question. I will be looking into this for my own personal knowledge too. So Jazakallah khairan for that question. Brother mentioned in the chat about alcohol and alcohol-free, 0% alcohol and alcohol-free. So 0% alcohol means 0% alcohol, and alcohol-free. So it depends on the country that you're you're basing this term on, because all of these things will have a legal connotation. So in the UK, for something to be free from, it needs to have less than a certain percentage, and alcohol free is usually 0.05%, so less than 0.5%. So there is a difference. There is 0% alcohol, as in it has 0 alcohol in it, and then there's alcohol free, which can have a very small quantity of alcohol within it. But that's just a legal technicality. Both of them would, unless we're talking about khamar or de-alkalizing, would be halal. There's a question here about taurine. Taurine has a reputation that it's problematic in terms of where it comes from, but actually in terms of industry, there's no issue whatsoever, because it's all synthetically produced, and so there's no issue. Though I don't know of any halal certified taurine sources or anything like that. There's a question here from Sajid. Right, being a soft drink, I wouldn't be able to give you a specific answer on a specific product, because I haven't done the full review, as we just talked about.
This session is not to give you a certification, please.
Yeah.
Bear with us. As Brother Salahuddin mentioned, you want him to burn every stages and tell you halal or haram. For Allah's sake, please. I think you missed the point. Please, okay. Next question from
this question is
GM food.
Yeah, this is actually a very interesting question, and a question that has been discussed in great detail by the ulama in Indonesia and Malaysia as well, because initially there was a thought that it's easier to say that it's not acceptable, because it's unknown whether it's harmful, whether it's, all of these things. So for a time it wasn't acceptable. There has been more work done on this. Obviously, scientists have been giving their input as well on what it is. And the latest rulings that I've seen are you have to get into a lot of detail, and you have to be able to answer some very technical questions. For example, what was the DNA source of the genetically modified material that's been added to the product? Some people have discussed things about using which vectors have been used to transfer the DNA. Is there any chance of harm or contamination to humans? Is it going to cause any damage? And basically, if you can answer all of these technical questions, then it depends on which way you will swing. If it's a plant source DNA causing no issues, and then it's only a beneficial thing, it's only some slight modification, then yeah, then it would be acceptable, but otherwise it's deemed as unacceptable. I think there's some more questions here. Pure alcohol. I know of one such source of what can be considered as pure alcohol. I put that in inverted commas because it's what we're talking here. You have to always remember that chemically speaking, and I'm talking now from purely chemistry background, alcohol is anything that has the hydroxyl group on it. So there are thousands, millions, an infinite number of alcohols that can be present. So in this context, I'm assuming you're talking about ethanol, which is the alcohol that is present in wine and these kind of alcoholic beverages. So there's an understanding that the ethanol itself, pure ethanol, as in ethanol that didn't come from wine, for example, or from vodka or from whiskey or something, that alcohol would be pure because it's the kind of one that you use for sterilization and sanitization. there's another way of producing alcohol, even though even this industrial, what would be classed as industrial alcohol, is still produced using yeast and then just excessively distilled until it's completely pure. There is another way of producing alcohol, and that's using fossil fuels, using basically you directly modify ethane gas. And so this ethanol has never met yeast, it has never met plants. It is essentially chemical alcohol, and I have seen this actually certified before. So this is alcohol that can be used in cosmetics. It, in chemical sense and in its properties, is exactly the same as industrial alcohol that's made from sugar cane or something like that. But it's never been or been near khamar or gone through the same process. So I hope that answers that question. Is there a document that explains the difference between halal certification in different countries? No, there's been many attempts at this. I know some people who have attempted PhDs and master's degrees in trying to come to the bottom of this. But it's a very good idea. If you're putting yourself forward, then I'm sure that you'll make it'll be a big service to the Ummah to be able to get this. What does the question mean? Halal food kit?
Is there something that may be available for halal food kit? My question. My understanding.
So that
food
you can
kit
make
for
halal
yourself.
food?
For yourself to test it, I think it's very difficult. You're in the chemistry industry, so you should be able to.
The thing, so for testing, it's very difficult because the only real thing that you can test for is DNA, so pork DNA. And obviously, if it's halal chicken or non-halal chicken, there's no way of checking the difference in terms of biologically and chemically. There's no different. So the only things that I've seen for testing is people running DNA tests on to determine food, pork presence, and if there's not supposed to be any animal derivative present in the product. So, for example, if we go back to the biscuit again, then to make sure that there's no meat present in this product of any other kind, and obviously you can test for alcohol. Most of the halal accreditation bodies like Malaysia and Indonesia, the UAE, they are also developing standards based on exactly this. So to allow certification bodies to set up laboratories themselves to test in line with internationally recognized laboratory standards on how to test for certain things. Because you have to remember, alcohol is very difficult to detect at very low levels in a biscuit, for example. So the biscuit, you wouldn't be able to test this in the same way that normal laboratories test for alcohol in a beverage. So there have to be slight differences. They are available and it's present in terms of in the analytical world of testing. It can be done, but to unify them and to define testing requirements, these standards are still being developed, or were still being developed. I hope that answers the question about the halal food kit. If not, then please send it again. A very good question here from Brother Fuad, I think. Is it the presence of ethanol that makes something haram, or if it makes you drunk or lose your mind? It's a very complex question, very nuanced question, nuanced answer for this, because ethanol in itself will make you drunk if you drank it. if you just had pure ethanol. It will kill you as well because it's too strong to be drunk, but it is the thing that makes you drunk. But also it can be, as I just mentioned, can be made and sourced from in a way that is completely separate from khamr. So the actual ruling and the understanding that is come to is actually understanding the intention behind producing something. So if something was designed, produced, and intended to make you drunk and lose your mind, then this would be haram. The ethanol within itself, so ethanol as a pure substance, is not deemed as haram within itself. If it's added to something to give you the effect of making you drunk, then it will become haram. So I guess in some sense it's the fact that it makes you lose your mind that is the issue. Is stunned animal halal? But Anwar, should I open this can of worms or shall we leave that one?
So, oh, you just go for it. There is different opinion the same.
So the opinions are pretty much unanimously across the certifying bodies, including the UAE, including Malaysia and Indonesia, that stunning, as long as it does not kill the animal, is halal. It's a form of restraint. And I think when people start this discussion about stunning and non-stunning of animals, I will always ask these people if they have visited a modern slaughterhouse to watch the production of chicken. Most people will not even be able to enter into this place because it's a terrible place. It smells bad. There's a lot of mess. And when you understand the numbers of chicken that are slaughtered, and the only people who are at fault is ourselves, the consumer, because of how much we demand from this. That there are how many hundreds of chickens don't even survive the journey from the farm to the abattoir, to the slaughterhouse, and then what process the chicken has to go through in the abattoir. The slaughtermen, how many they have to kill every minute, essentially. You know, it's mind-boggling if you go to watch these. And if you do stand and watch the slaughter process, it's not like, you know, how people think that one person has picked up one chicken and they're in a field and the chicken is all happy and the chicken hasn't seen the knife and he managed to think about what he's doing and then slaughter the chicken. No, this poor brother is, you know, killing chickens constantly. The chickens are hung upside down on essentially a roller coaster from the start of the factory to the slaughterhouse, to the slaughtermen. And if they are flapping, which they will be if they have not been stunned, they will break their wings, they will be injured, and the slaughterman can very easily decapitate the chicken. So the chicken will just have no head. It won't have had only the front portion of its neck cut, for example. And I've also seen certain slaughterhouses where the same slaughterhouse can produce stunned and unstunned chickens, and essentially they just turn on the stunner when they do, whichever way they do it. This is for small birds, for small animals, chickens. For lamb, for example, stunning almost will never kill the animal, and it's also possible to quite easily slaughter them without using stunning. So in this case, there's generally no issue because people accept that stunning of these larger animals is not going to kill them, as long as it's stunning that doesn't kill. When it comes to cattle, this is a very big issue in the UK because if I remember correctly, UK law doesn't accept any other stunning other than a captive bolt, which essentially, if you left the cow like that, would kill the cow, or at least make it completely in a vegetative state, because you've essentially destroyed its brain. So stunning to stun and not to kill the animal is it's acceptable by pretty much everyone. I hope that answers that question briefly and hasn't bruised too many issues.
Thank you, Brother Salahuddin. I think, alhamdulillah, we have almost like 1 hour and a half and 30 minutes duration. And I know, alhamdulillah, there will be continuous question on this issue. We are here just to give you a brief and not to give you a full course on the issue. But as I mentioned in the beginning, that please write your full name and email to us. We will send you the recording of this program. The other thing is that we will send you a copy of this program, and inshallah, if any other kind of query that further interests to you, send us an email. Inshallah, we will look into how we can help you. For your information, this program was organized by Human Welfare League in association with Al Ghazali Institute of Madagascar, and alhamdulillah, many people from Madagascar were there. We sent them the French version. So if you have any personal question as well, please do not hesitate to send us. We will try to respond. I will ask Brother Salahuddin to do. My hope is that to put this video hopefully with subtitle in French as well, and also we will have other program in the coming weeks. Watch out for this important program on the green issue, environment, by a professor, inshallah. Please keep tuned. We will keep in touch with you. With this word, I wish to thank everyone who have participated. May Allah bless you. Jazakallah khair. Barakallahu. Inshallah, we will terminate this meeting. Jazakallah khair. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Salam.